Let's talk about hard truths, shall we? Hard truth number one. There's not a single person in the United States who thinks Joe Biden is doing a good job as president. The fact that 30-something% of the population claims to approve of his performance is not evidence that those people really think that, but rather it's evidence of how inextricably attached some people are to their tribal affiliations. For a certain portion of the population, if the president is from their party, if the president is the guy they happen to have voted for, then that means the country is in great shape and the president is doing a splendid job. Nothing could ever happen to dissuade such people from voting according to their tribal affiliation. Not even as they tiptoe around used heroin needles and piles of hobo crap to get to their polling place, which is situated in an area that 30 years of Democrat leadership has turned into a burned-out ghost town. In point of fact, in our big cities, the Democrat Party has become pretty much the same thing the PRI used to be for 75 years in Mexico. You're in a permanent one-party state. Everybody in the government is corrupt or incompetent or both. Life never gets better for anybody. There's just a slow, inexorable downward spiral of stagnation and despair. But every election, there's that institutionalized single party winning by an unassailably wide margin, just like they always do. Meanwhile, the residents all roll their eyes at one another in the mutually understood knowledge that even if a candidate from another party managed to get himself on the ballot, even if he managed to win the election, guess who's in charge of counting the votes? Guess who installed all the bureaucrats who are in charge of certifying the election? When the same faction has wielded inscrutable power for decades on end, getting it out of power is a hell of a lot more difficult than just winning a free and fair election. Why? Because there's no such thing as a free and fair election in a permanent one-party state or city or locale. Everybody in the government, everybody in the police department, everybody on the courts, they all got their jobs and kept their jobs by being members in good standing of the party in power. And one does not remain a member in good standing of the party in power by certifying an election victory for the opponents. It used to be, up until not all that long ago, that when we talked about such things in such terms, it was clear that we were talking about the way politics and elections work in third world countries, or developing democracies, to use the politically correct nomenclature. Places that were striving to have democratic elections that are as fair and legitimate as the elections in the United States. But right now, today, can we still make that distinction without being a bunch of damned hypocrites? I don't think we can. For just as nobody actually believes Joe Biden is a capable leader with a functioning prefrontal cortex, nobody believes the elections are really on the level in the cities and states that have been permanently Democrat for 30 or 40 or 50 years. When they say 2020 was the most secure election in our history, and they say that really often, they're not actually making a qualitative judgment about the fairness of the election. What they're actually saying is, my guy won, so of course the election was perfect and infallible and immaculate in every respect. Let's take the Gavin Newsom recall election from last year, in which Gavin Newsom defeated the recall with an almost identical margin as the one by which he was elected governor in the first place. But wait, over 2 million registered voters signed the petition to have the recall placed on the ballot, so we can safely surmise that none of those people voted to retain Mr. Newsom in office. How then, on the day, can you wind up with 65% of the electorate voting against the recall? The answer is, you can't. Those two facts about the world are mutually exclusive of one another. They are irreconcilable. If 2 million voters signed the recall petition, it is not possible that 65% of the electorate wanted to keep the governor in office. One of those things has to be false. But we have certified results that say they are both true. So the question comes down to this. How much are you willing to believe the permanently entrenched faction that controls all the levers of power? I always loved the name of the PRI for its wonderful unintentional irony. Institutional Revolutionary Party. Talk about being self-contradictory. Like when you cozy up to the bar and say, "Pour me a non-alcoholic tequila there, hombre." From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our scenic coastal vistas are almost lovely enough to distract you from the stench of the Mexican sewage in the water. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And President Joe Biden, as you may have noticed, during his long and singularly undistinguished career in national politics, is a man of precious few talents. And even when he was in his prime, such as it was, back around the time of my birth, there were few things he did worse than public oration. And no one has been more acutely aware of this shortcoming than Joe Biden himself. In fact, the very first time he ran for president, all the way back in 1988, he only had one stump speech, and about 95% of it was cribbed, copy-pasted, verbatim from a speech given in the House of Commons in 1968 by an obscure British socialist MP called Neil Kinnock. He kept doing this for a month or two, and even though these were the horse and buggy days of the 1980s, when my hometown didn't even have telegraph service yet, eventually the intrepid journalists in our mainstream news media caught on to what was happening and duly exposed Biden for the liar and the plagiarist that he is, and he promptly exited the race in shame and humiliation. Ordinarily, when you get caught doing something as shockingly dishonest as that, you can expect to say goodbye not just to your chances of winning the presidency, but to your political career in general. But here's where Joe Biden had a secret advantage. A trump card, if you will, for Joe Biden is from a place called Delaware, a state with a population smaller than 12 American cities, but they still get 2 senators. So if you're an ambitious young politician from Pennsylvania, but you know that you're far too dull and unexceptional to ever be elected in a real state with an actual population of which to speak, everything you ever wanted is right across that river, ripe for the taking. So if you can manage to blunder your way into a Delaware Senate seat, not only will you never lose re-election, no matter how much of a bumbling doofus you are, but you'll never have to attract more than 150,000 votes in doing so. Fewer votes than it takes to get elected mayor of Phoenix. And so, after the humiliating debacle of his failed presidential run and consequent plagiarism scandal, Joe Biden didn't have a care in the world when he came up for re-election in 1990. As a third-term senator, he was already on most of the best committees, and with a fourth term, he would be one of the cocks of the walk, a member of the absolute upper echelon of the Senate Democrat leadership. In other words, for the people of a tiny little dingbat state like Delaware, who already wield massively outsized influence by having 2 senators, if one of those senators has sufficient seniority to be in the top level of the leadership, that outsized influence increases even more exponentially. Which is to say, as much of an embarrassing scandal as the plagiarism thing was, it would have taken far more than that to convince the people of Delaware not to return Joe Biden to the Senate for a 4th term in 1990. I mean, he could have videotaped himself snorting lines of coke off his niece's boobs, and it might not have mattered. Wait, that's something his son actually did do. I should think of a better example that hits less close to home. Oh, I got it. He could have banged his dead brother's widow, and it might not have mattered. Shit, Hunter did that too. Okay, how about this one? He could have knocked up a random stripper and refused to pay child support, and it might not have mattered. Don't say it, Jim Eagle. I'm not going to sit here all night trying to think of a comically morally depraved thing that Admiral Hunter Biden, America's greatest naval hero, Nelson on the Delaware, hasn't done. We could both be here until the cows come home or until the heat death of the universe, whichever came first. So needless to say, it's among the least attractive features of our system that a clueless, dumbass buffoon like Joseph R. Biden Jr. can be elected to national public office and continually return to said office, irrespective of the quality of his performance, because the people of his tiny state have a perverse incentive to keep re-electing him, whether he warrants re-election or not. And it's a feature that was made orders of magnitude worse by the goddamn stupid 17th Amendment, which I would love to be able to say I saw abolished in my lifetime. But anyway, now that the semi-animated cadaver of this former segregationist senator is somehow occupying the presidency, and at a sufficiently advanced age that his brain has basically turned into applesauce, his oratorical skills have gone from bad to worse to embarrassing to insufferable to whatever the proper adjective is when it's a confused geriatric up on stage gargling his dentures, being defeated by the 10-foot-wide teleprompter screen with letters the size of a newborn infant, making assorted spit and phlegm noises, and occasionally managing a word or phrase that can be comprehended as something resembling English. True in and unashamed pressure. and we're gonna blim blam the rap-a-dab-a-doo. So Joe addressed the AFL-CIO yesterday. It was probably the most cringe-inducing, fiery train wreck of a speech that he's given in his entire 157-year career in national politics, but I still would be fascinated to know who actually writes this crap. Because some of it sounds so bad, I think I could almost believe Joe Biden wrote it himself. My first reaction to this speech, my hot take, to borrow the parlance of the youngsters, was to remark on the fact that Joe seems to have lost the middle ground between his two signature speaking voices, the one being creepy, whispery child molester Joe, and the other one being screaming, yelling, angry grandpa. He seems to be switching directly from the one to the other now, and it makes for a pretty off-putting effect, like he can't decide whether he wants to stiff your hair and rub your shoulders, or just punch you in the dick. But the overriding theme seems to always be the same. I am a great president. I am just misunderstood. A part of it is the media's fault, because there have been times when they have not maintained absolute 100% slavish devotion, and obviously that's a danger to democracy, because we always need the news media to be blowing smoke up the president's ass. Unless the president is Trump. And the other problem is the online, the internet. That's what it's called. These social media thingamajiggers. Now, the young people on my staff tell me that you can go on these online web internet sites and they're allowed to say bad things about me, just willy-nilly. I'm not joking, folks. Actually, I need to digress here for a moment, because I need to remark on something that Joe said during his visit with Jimmy Kimmel last Friday, an appearance which I guess was supposed to suffice as the president's first sit-down interview in over 120 days, but if that counts as an interview, I am the Queen of France, because I half expected Kimmel to actually pull out a hanky and wipe the dribble off of Joe's mouth. He was like the devoted grandson trying to help Pop navigate the salad bar at Soup Plantation. No, Grandpa, you don't want the garbanzo beans. Remember they made you gassy last time and you got all cranky? So at one point, when he's trying to decry all the things he sees as defective in our culture, Joe says, "Now turn on the TV, the commercials, and when's the last time you saw a biracial couple?" Has Joe Biden actually not watched television since 1978? Because I don't feel like he has. In fact, I've remarked fairly often on this program that if you were a visitor from outer space and your only insight into the American people and American culture was our television commercials, you might conclude with a fair degree of confidence that the U.S. population is around 85% black and at least 50% gay. I also wonder what it was that Joe meant when he said biracial couple. And answering that question might be a fool's errand anyway, because Joe himself probably doesn't have any idea. But if we're being pedantic, and of course we're being pedantic, you wouldn't be here if you were not a fan of pedantry, then a biracial couple would mean two mulattoes, or a mulatto and a mulatress? Mulatrix? Someone tell me which one is correct, because I don't want to mismulatto anybody. I think what he probably meant was interracial couple, and you have to honestly wonder what the hell decade this man thinks he is living in. I remember interracial couples on TV commercials when I was a small child in the 80s, and I also remember nobody giving a damn about it. But then the next question we have to ask is this. What point did Joe Biden think he was trying to make? That it will advance the cause of society, that America will become a manifestly better place, that the social fabric of our nation will be structurally reinforced if we have more biracial couples in our TV commercials? And don't blame me, it was the first thing he mentioned, so it must be weighing pretty heavily on that large blob of silly putty that used to be his brain. It was so bad, even Jimmy Kimmel got spooked by it. He's thinking, come on, guys, I'm a team player. I am in the tank for the regime, but what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And he promptly cuts off the President of the United States right in mid-sentence and is like, "Okay, Grandpa, we're going to go to commercial now, and we'll get you to the end of the salad bar, and I'll wipe the dribble off your chin, and we'll see if your favorite booth is available, the one right by the restroom." Now, as a qualitative matter, if we are living in a results-oriented world, it's well beyond argument at this point that Joe Biden is the worst president ever elected in his own right, allegedly. And probably also the worst in absolute terms, including the accidental ones, which I'm sure is a load off the mind of the ghost of Andrew Johnson, knowing there's someone who was worse at the job than he was. And better yet, Joe managed to do it without being drunk off his ass from morning to midnight. So in the final tally, Joe Biden's senility was a more powerful hindrance than Andrew Johnson's alcoholism, which is a pretty auspicious achievement in the judgment of this reporter. But don't tell any of that to Joe Biden, because Joe Biden will put his bony old finger up in your face and he'll say, "Look here, fat! I've achieved great things, things no president ever achieved." But the news media, they just lie all the time, and the social internet media web thingy, it lies too. Misinformation, disinformation, they want you to think Putin's price hike is my fault. Can you believe the nerve of these people? But you'll be relieved to know, Mr. and Mrs. America, that your president, he's got a simple, easy 3-step solution to restoring the economy that he wrecked and salvaging the 5-alarm dumpster fire that the country has become on his watch, but which totally was not his fault. First, we need to make sure the media only ever say nice, glowing, complimentary things about him and the confederation of dunces that he calls a cabinet. Second, we need to make sure anyone who criticizes him online is jailed as a Russian spy or a January 6th insurrectionist, or both. Third, we need to tax the rich, baby. Now here's the relevant passage from the AFL-CIO speech. Quote, "Republicans have it all backwards. Their plan literally calls for increasing taxes on middle class and working people and cutting taxes on corporations and wealthy Americans. And I'm not talking about punishing anyone. Just pay your fair share. It's a matter of decency. It's a matter of dignity. It's a matter of fiscal responsibility." Close quote. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tax hikes and growing the government will save the economy, this man just said with a straight face. Just pay your fair share, he says, as if it's some folksy common sense aphorism that is just self-evidently true. If certain people pay more personal income tax, that will fix everything. Problem solved. And if we had a president who was willing to do real interviews with actual journalists, here's one of the first questions he would be asked about this proposal of his. Mr. President, when Jimmy Carter left office in 1980, the top marginal income tax rate was 72%. And we had the worst economy since the Great Depression. And today you're proposing the exact same thing, so would you please explain how and why the result would be any different now than it was then? Joe Biden is a 1970s politician. His cultural memory comes straight from the 1970s, when it's the last time he watched television, apparently. And his policy proposals have already failed in the 1970s, because there's nothing more progressive than going back to the same well of discredited big government bullshit from 50 years ago and acting like the result is going to be any different. But I guess therein lies the danger of having a younger generation that is utterly ignorant of their own country's modern political history because they haven't learned it in school and their parents haven't stepped in to pick up the slack. There's no reason why a 25-year-old voter shouldn't know and understand why Jimmy Carter was a failed president, or be able to recognize that Joe Biden's economic platform is Jimmy Carter 2.0. Young people are really good at retaining information. You just have to tell it to them. And as I take leave tonight, here's the question I want you to ponder. Which affectation is more politically unattractive? Joe Biden's creepy, whispery child molester voice, or Kamala Harris's sudden outbursts of maniacal cackling, like you half expect her to say, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too." Thank you very much indeed for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. I'll see you Friday. In the meantime, do not comply. Get off my lawn.